The phone rang on a Wednesday evening. She had not spoken to him in 4 months. There had been no quarrel, no bitter last word flung across a kitchen table, only the quiet drift that happens when two people let the current of daily life carry them beyond the reach of each other's voice. But that Wednesday, at 7 minutes past 8, she lifted the receiver and heard him say, with something close to bewilderment in his tone, "I don't know what happened. I have not been able to get you out of my mind all week." She knew what happened. She had been sitting in her armchair each night before sleep, holding his face gently in her imagination, feeling, not hoping, not wishing, but feeling, the warmth of his presence as though he were already beside her. She told no one. She performed no ritual. She turned the full current of her inner life toward him, the way you turn a lamp toward a page you want to read. And she held that feeling until it became as natural to her as breathing. He called because he had to, not because she forced him, not because she manipulated some hidden lever in the machinery of his will. He called because something stirred in the deep waters of his own mind, a pull, an impression, an impulse he could not trace to any visible cause, and it drew him back to her the way a river is drawn toward the sea, not by effort, but by the quiet, irresistible law of its own nature. What I am going to teach you tonight is not a trick. It is not a technique borrowed from the bargain shelf of popular psychology or dressed up in the language of modern attraction. It is a law, as impersonal and as reliable as gravity, that has been operating in your life since the day you were born, whether you knew its name or not. It is the law by which one mind speaks to another without words, without wires, without any visible bridge between them. And once you understand how it works, once you learn to use it with the same deliberate intention with which you would use your hands or your voice, you will never again wonder whether it is possible to reach another human being with nothing but the focused activity of your own thought. I am going to show you how, and I am going to show you why it works. Before this hour ends, you will understand the single principle that governs all mental influence between one person and another. Not as a theory, but as a law you can test tonight. You will learn the exact method I taught to men and women in my lectures in Los Angeles, the method by which a thought held in the right way, at the right depth of mind, transmits itself to another person as surely as a voice transmits itself across a telephone wire. You will see, through the real experiences of those who practice this law, what happened when they applied it, and what happened when they applied it wrongly. And I will tell you something that most teachers of the mind leave out because it requires more honesty than most teachers possess. I will tell you why this law carries a responsibility as serious as its power, and how to wield it in a way that honors both you and the person you wish to reach. If something in this teaching moves you, if a single sentence shifts the ground beneath your understanding of what is possible between two minds, I would ask you to let that be known. Your acknowledgement is not a small thing. It carries this work beyond this quiet room to the stranger who needs it most and does not yet know it exists. If something stirs recognition in you, say so in your own words. That expression deepens the very faculty we are here to train. And if you wish to remain close to this teaching, to return to it the way one returns to a conversation that has not yet finished, then stay near. Now, let me begin where all true understanding of the mind must begin, with the nature of the mind itself. There is a belief so common and so deeply held that most people never think to question it. The belief is this, that your mind is yours alone, that it is a private room, sealed off from every other mind on earth, connected to the outside world only through the narrow doorways of speech and action and the written word, that what happens inside your thought is invisible, inaudible, and entirely without consequence until you choose to express it through some physical means. This belief is wrong. It is not merely incomplete. It is wrong in the way that believing the earth is flat is wrong. It contradicts the testimony of every serious investigator of the mind who has ever lived, from the authors of the ancient scriptures to the researchers in the modern laboratory. And it has kept more people imprisoned in loneliness, in helplessness, in the quiet conviction that they cannot reach the people they love, than perhaps any other single error in the history of human thought. Let me tell you what is actually true. There is one mind, not many minds. 1. The subconscious mind that operates beneath your awareness is not a separate, isolated organ locked inside the vault of your skull. It is a point of entry, a doorway, if you will, into a field of intelligence that is shared by every living being on this earth. What you call your subconscious mind and what I call my subconscious mind are not two different minds. They are two windows opening onto the same vast interior. And what is impressed upon this interior from one window can be perceived, felt, sensed, registered from every other window that opens onto the same space. This is not mysticism. This is the plain teaching of every spiritual tradition that has endured the test of centuries, and it is increasingly the finding of every honest scientist who has examined the phenomena of telepathy, of remote impression, of the uncanny synchronicities that fill the ordinary lives of ordinary people. When a mother wakes in the night with sudden certainty that her child is in danger and learns the next morning that her child 3,000 miles away was indeed in an accident at the precise hour she awoke, she has not performed a miracle. She has demonstrated the normal operation of a faculty that every human being possesses and almost no one has been taught to use. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. That is the promise recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, the 18th chapter, the 20th verse. And I want you to hear it not as a statement about a physical gathering of bodies in a church or a lecture hall, but as a description of what happens when two minds meet in the deep interior, in the subconscious, in that shared field where all minds are already gathered, already present, already in communion. The I that is present in the midst of them is the universal intelligence itself, the one mind that wears your face and mine and the face of every person you have ever loved or longed to reach. A woman wrote to me from Philadelphia. Her name was Margaret, and she had not spoken to her brother in nearly 3 years. The estrangement had begun over a matter of money, an inheritance, a misunderstanding, the kind of wound that families inflict upon themselves with the casual efficiency of people who know exactly where the tender places are. Margaret had written letters. She had attempted telephone calls. Every effort had been met with silence, and eventually she had stopped trying. Not because she had stopped caring, but because she had run out of visible roads. When she came to one of my public lectures, I was teaching on exactly this subject: the unity of the subconscious mind and its implications for human relationship. And something I said that evening struck her with the force of a door swinging open onto a room she had not known was there. I said, "You cannot be truly separated from anyone you love, because separation is an illusion of the conscious mind. In the subconscious, in the deep interior where all minds meet, you are still connected. The wire has never been cut. You have simply stopped sending a signal." Margaret went home that night and did something very simple. She sat in the quietness of her bedroom before sleep and brought her brother's face into her imagination, not as the cold, angry man who had refused her calls, but as the boy she had grown up with, the boy who had carried her on his shoulders through the sprinkler in the backyard of their parents' house in the summer of 1952. She held that image, and more importantly, she held the feeling that accompanied it, the feeling of warmth, of closeness, of the simple and uncomplicated love that had existed between them before the world taught them to keep accounts. She did this every night for 19 days. She told me she set no deadline, made no demand, attached no urgency to the practice. She sat with the feeling of connection the way you might sit with a warm cup in your hands on a cold evening, not reaching for anything, not expecting anything, simply allowing the warmth to be present. On the 20th day, her brother called. His voice was not the voice of a man who had been persuaded or pressured or worn down. It was the voice of a man who had been moved from within. A man who said, "I don't understand it, but something in me has changed. I want to put this behind us." Margaret did not tell her brother what she had done. There was no need. What she had done was not an act of manipulation. It was an act of restoration, a return to the truth that already existed beneath the surface quarrel, the truth that their connection had never been severed, only obscured. She did not create a new bond. She cleared away the debris that had been hiding the bond that was already there. I want you to notice something about Margaret's story, because it reveals a law that most people overlook. Her brother could not explain why he called. He did not say, "Margaret sent me a mental message and I decided to respond." He said something had changed in him. The impulse arose from within his own awareness, wearing the clothing of his own memory, speaking in his own inner voice. That is how the one mind works. It does not deliver foreign packages to your doorstep with a return address. It stirs something native, a memory, a feeling, a sudden turning of attention that seems to originate within the person themselves, because in a very real sense it does. The one mind is not a bridge between two strangers. It is the common ground on which both already stand. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That is the testimony of the book of Proverbs, the 23rd chapter, the 7th verse. And notice, it does not say as a man thinketh in his head. It says in his heart, in the feeling center, in the subconscious, in that deep place where thought and feeling are indistinguishable. What Margaret held in her heart about her brother, the warmth, the memory, the uncomplicated love, became in time what her brother felt in his own heart. Not because she had overridden his mind, but because hearts that are joined in the deep interior share whatever is planted in either one. This is the first principle you must understand. You are not trying to force your way into another person's mind. You are not projecting yourself across empty space, hoping to arrive at a distant target. You are turning inward to the one mind that already connects you, and you are sending a signal through a channel that has been open since before either of you drew your first breath. The question has never been whether the connection exists. The question has only been whether you know how to use it. Most people, when they first hear what I have just told you, make the same mistake. They go home, they sit in a chair, they close their eyes, and they begin to think at another person. They repeat the person's name. They construct elaborate mental speeches, arguments, pleas, declarations, and they broadcast these words into the silence of their bedroom with the intensity of a radio operator sending a distress signal across a dark ocean. And nothing happens. The phone does not ring. The letter does not arrive. The person they were trying to reach goes about their life without the faintest tremor of recognition that they were being summoned. And the one who tried the experiment sits back, disappointed, and says, "It does not work. It does work, but not the way they tried it." The medium of mental transmission is not thought, it is feeling. This is the distinction upon which everything I am teaching you tonight depends. And if you take nothing else from this hour, take this. It is not what you think about another person that reaches them. It is what you feel about them. The thought is the vehicle, the feeling is the passenger, and it is the passenger, not the vehicle, that arrives. This is what the ancient writer of Proverbs understood when he counseled, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." The 4th chapter, the 23rd verse. The heart he spoke of is not the organ in your chest. It is the feeling center, the place where belief lives not as an opinion but as a breathing conviction. And from that center, through the one mind, your feeling reaches every person you hold in thought. When you sit in your chair and repeat someone's name with the frantic energy of a person trying to be heard through a closed door, you are generating thought, but the feeling beneath that thought is almost always desperation, anxiety, need, want. And that is the signal that travels, not the words, not the images, not the carefully constructed mental script, the feeling. The subconscious mind does not transmit language, it transmits states, and the state you are in while you think of another person is the state that person receives. Consider what this means. If you think of someone with longing, you transmit longing, and longing, received at the subconscious level, does not draw a person closer, it pushes them away. Because longing is, at its core, the feeling of absence. It says, "You are not here." And the subconscious mind, which is literal in all things, accepts that verdict and maintains the distance. If you think of someone with anxiety, will they call? Will they come? Will they change? You transmit anxiety. And anxiety received does not inspire approach. It inspires avoidance. The other person will feel, without knowing why, a vague discomfort when your name arises in their mind, a subtle impulse to keep their distance, a feeling they cannot explain and will not examine but will obey. What you impress upon the subconscious, you express. That is the law. And it operates not only within your own life, but between your life and every life your thought has ever touched. But if you think of someone with warmth, with genuine, unhurried, unclenching warmth, you transmit warmth, and warmth, received at the level of the subconscious, is one of the most powerful attractive forces in human experience. It says, you are welcome here. You are safe here. And the subconscious mind of the other person, receiving that signal through the one mind that connects you both, responds the way every living thing responds to warmth, by moving toward it. I want you to understand how precise this mechanism is. When you hold a feeling of genuine warmth toward another person, you are not merely wishing them well in some abstract, diffuse way. You are creating a specific atmospheric condition in the shared interior, a climate that surrounds the other person's thought of you, the way the temperature of a room surrounds the body of the person sitting in it. They do not analyze the climate. They do not identify its source. They simply feel it. And in that feeling, the thought of you becomes pleasant, becomes inviting, becomes something the mind returns to willingly rather than something it pushes away. This is why two people who have not spoken in months will sometimes reach for the telephone at the same hour on the same evening, not because one has compelled the other, but because both have entered the same warm region of the shared mind, and in that warmth, the impulse to connect arises naturally in both at once. A man I counseled in Los Angeles, I will call him Bernard, came to me with a difficulty that was, on the surface, a matter of business. He was a manufacturer of furniture, and he had a partner with whom he had built a successful enterprise over the course of 12 years. But the partnership had soured. There had been disputes over the direction of the company, disagreements that hardened into resentments, and finally a coldness between the two men that had made their daily interactions brittle and exhausting. Bernard wanted his partner to soften, to return to the spirit of cooperation that had built the business in the first place. He had tried conversation, negotiation, and finally the threat of legal dissolution. Nothing had worked. I asked Bernard a question. I said, when you think about your partner, and I do not mean when you sit down deliberately to think about him, I mean throughout the ordinary course of your day, what do you feel? Bernard was honest enough to answer truthfully. He said, anger, resentment, frustration. I feel like he has betrayed the work we built together. And that, I said, is the telegram you have been sending him every single day for the past 2 years. Not the words of your negotiations, not the logic of your arguments. The feeling. He receives your anger the way a person receives the temperature of a room, not through any single stimulus, but through a pervasive atmospheric impression that colors everything he perceives when he is in your presence or when your name passes through his mind. I asked Bernard to do something that seemed to him, at first, both foolish and dishonest. I asked him to spend 10 minutes each evening, in the quiet period before sleep, holding a mental picture of his partner, not as the adversary he had become, but as the friend he had been. I asked him to recall a specific moment of genuine goodwill between them, and Bernard chose a fishing trip they had taken together in the early years of their partnership, a weekend on a lake in Oregon where they had laughed and planned and spoken of the business they would build with the unguarded enthusiasm of men who trusted each other completely. I asked him to hold that scene, to dwell in it, to feel its warmth as a present reality, not a distant memory. But he was also desperate, which is often the doorway through which the skeptical mind finally allows itself to learn. He practiced the exercise faithfully for 3 weeks. On the 23rd day, his partner walked into his office, closed the door, sat down in the chair across from the desk, and said, and I am quoting Bernard's letter to me, which I still possess, I have been thinking about that trip to Klamath Lake. I do not know why it keeps coming back to me, but it reminded me of why we started this thing in the first place, and I think we have been fools. The conversation that followed lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, the partnership had been restored, not on paper, but in spirit. And the legal threats, the rigid negotiations, the cold formality that had characterized their interaction for 2 years dissolved as though they had never existed. Bernard did not change his partner's mind. He changed his own feeling. And his feeling, transmitted through the one subconscious mind that connects all living beings, changed the atmosphere in which his partner's thoughts about him occurred. The partner did not know why his feelings shifted. He only knew that they did, and he acted accordingly, because that is what human beings always do. They act according to the feeling that occupies them at the deepest level, regardless of what their conscious mind may have decided. This is the second principle. The feeling you hold about another person is the signal you send. Not the thought, not the wish, the feeling. Choose it with the same care you would choose the words of a letter that your entire future depended upon. Because in a very real sense, that is exactly what it is. I have told you the principle. I have told you the medium. Now I must tell you the method, the specific practice by which you take what I have taught you and apply it with the precision of a craftsman applying his tools to raw material. The method rests on 3 conditions, and if any one of the 3 is absent, the practice will not produce its full effect. They are relaxation, visualization, and the assumption of the wish fulfilled. Let me speak about each one in the order that matters. The first condition is relaxation, and by this I do not mean the casual relaxation of a person sitting in a comfortable chair after dinner. I mean the specific, deliberate relaxation of the body and the conscious mind that occurs in what I have called, throughout my work, the state akin to sleep. This is the drowsy state, the border region between wakefulness and sleep, where the conscious mind, with all its doubts and objections and its ceaseless habit of analysis, quiets to a murmur. It is the state you pass through every night as you drift towards sleep and every morning as you rise from it. And it is, without exception, the most powerful state of consciousness available to you for the purpose of impressing the subconscious mind. Why? Because the subconscious mind is always listening, but it is most receptive when the conscious mind is least active. Think of it this way: the conscious mind is a gatekeeper. During your waking hours, it stands at the door between you and the deep interior, examining every thought that seeks admission, accepting some, rejecting others, arguing with most. But in the drowsy state, in that quiet borderland where you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep, the gatekeeper steps aside. The door opens, and whatever you carry through that door in the form of a felt belief is accepted by the subconscious mind with the same unquestioning obedience with which it accepts the command to beat your heart. This is why I told you that this practice is done before sleep. Not because there is anything magical about the evening hour, but because the evening hour is when the drowsy state occurs naturally, without effort, without any need for elaborate technique. You are lying in your bed. The day has released its grip. Your body is still. Your mind is beginning its nightly descent towards sleep. And in that descent, there is a window. Brief, quiet, enormously powerful, through which you can speak directly to the intelligence that governs not only your own body and your own circumstances, but the shared interior that connects your mind to every other mind on earth. You will know you have reached this state by its feel. The room around you will seem to recede slightly, as though the walls have taken a step backward. Sounds will soften. The concerns that occupied you during the day will lose their sharpness, the way objects lose their edges in the hour before dusk. You will not be asleep. You will be aware, conscious, present. Your awareness will have shifted from the narrow, analytical mode of the daytime mind to something wider, quieter, more receptive. It is in this receptive state that the subconscious mind opens like a door that has been waiting all day for you to turn the handle. And whatever you carry through that door, whatever scene, whatever feeling, whatever quiet conviction you bring with you, will be received with a fidelity that your waking efforts cannot match. The second condition is the mental scene. This is not vague daydreaming. This is not thinking positive thoughts about the person you wish to reach. It is the construction, in your imagination, of a specific, concrete scene that would naturally occur if your desire had already been fulfilled. Let me be very precise about this because precision matters. If you wish a particular person to think of you with warmth, to feel drawn toward you, to reach out to you, to desire your presence, you do not lie in the drowsy state and repeat, "They are thinking of me, they are thinking of me." That is affirmation, and affirmation alone, without the support of a felt experience, is merely words bouncing off the walls of the conscious mind. Instead, you construct a scene in which you and this person are already together. Not a scene of reunion, which implies that separation was the truth. Not a scene of reconciliation, which implies that conflict was the truth. A scene of natural, comfortable, already existing togetherness, as though the connection you desire were as ordinary and as settled as the furniture in your room. Perhaps you see yourself sitting across a table from this person, sharing a meal. Perhaps you hear their voice on the telephone, speaking with ease and affection. Perhaps you feel their hand in yours as you walk down a familiar street. The specific scene does not matter, as long as it implies the fulfillment of your desire. What matters is that the scene is specific, that it is sensory, that you do not merely see it, but hear it, feel it, inhabit it, and that it carries the feeling of naturalness, of reality, of something that simply is. Whatsoever things ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. That is the instruction recorded in the Gospel of Mark, the 11th chapter, the 24th verse. And it is the most precise and practical instruction ever given for the operation of this law. Believe that ye receive them, not believe that ye will receive them, not hope that ye might receive them. Believe that the receiving is already accomplished, and hold that belief in feeling, in the drowsy state, in the quiet depth of your mind where belief is not an argument but an experience. The third condition is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is the element that most people omit, and it is the element without which the other two conditions are powerless. You may relax perfectly. You may construct a scene with the vividness of a master painter, but if the feeling that accompanies the scene is hope, which is the feeling of something not yet here, or longing, which is the feeling of something absent, or anxiety, which is the feeling of uncertainty, then the impression you make upon the subconscious mind will be an impression of distance, of lack, of something wanted and not yet possessed. And the subconscious, which is always faithful, will maintain that distance with the same obedience with which it would close it. The feeling you must hold is the feeling of already having, already being connected, already being in the presence of this person, already receiving their thought, their warmth, their attention, not as something you are reaching for, as something you inhabit the way you inhabit your own body. A young woman came to me in distress. I will call her Catherine. She had been estranged from a friend, a woman she had been close to since their university years, and the estrangement had lasted nearly 2 years. Catherine had tried to reach her friend through the conventional means, letters, telephone calls, a message passed through a mutual acquaintance. Every attempt had been met with silence. I taught Catherine this method. I asked her to lie down each night, to enter the drowsy state, and to construct one simple scene, herself and her friend sitting together on the bench in the garden of the university where they had first become friends, talking and laughing the way they once had. I told her to feel the sun on her face in that scene, to hear her friend's laughter, to feel the ease and the warmth of that friendship as a present reality she could touch and breathe and live inside. Catherine practiced this for 11 nights. On the 12th morning, she received a letter, not a telephone call, not a text, a handwritten letter from her friend. The letter said, in part, "I have been dreaming about the garden at Wellesley all week. I do not know what started it, but it made me miss you in a way I could not ignore." Catherine did not implant a thought in her friend's mind. She did not override her friend's will or manipulate her emotions. She aligned her own feeling with the truth of their connection, a truth that had not been destroyed by the estrangement, only obscured by it, and that alignment, operating through the one subconscious mind, surfaced in her friend's awareness as a dream, a memory, a feeling too strong to dismiss. This is the method. Relaxation. A specific scene. The feeling of the wish fulfilled. Practice it tonight. Practice it in the borderland between waking and sleeping, when the gatekeeper has stepped aside and the deep mind is ready to receive whatever you bring to it. And bring it not as a wish, not as a hope, not as a command flung across the distance between two separate beings, but as a quiet, settled, unhurried recognition of a connection that already exists and has always existed, waiting only for you to remember it. There is a principle in the philosophy of mind that I have found, over the course of my career, to be one of the most useful and least understood laws governing the relationship between the inner world and the outer. I call it the law of reversibility, and it operates like this. If a certain physical fact would produce a certain feeling in you, then producing that feeling within yourself, deliberately, vividly, in the state akin to sleep, will tend to produce the physical fact. Let me ask you to consider that again, slowly. If receiving a telephone call from someone you love would produce in you a feeling of warmth and surprise and quiet joy, then producing within yourself that very feeling of warmth and surprise and quiet joy, holding it in the drowsy state, dwelling in it as though the call had already come, will tend to produce the call. This is not wishful thinking. This is the operation of a law, the same law that governs every other relationship between cause and effect in the universe. We are accustomed to thinking that physical events cause feelings. The call comes, and therefore you feel joy. The letter arrives, and therefore you feel relief. The person walks through the door, and therefore you feel the warmth of reunion. We assume the sequence is fixed, event first, feeling second, and we never think to question it. But the sequence is not fixed. It runs in both directions, and this changes everything. The feeling can precede the event. And when it does, when it is held with sufficient vividness, in the right state of mind, with the naturalness of something genuinely experienced rather than merely imagined, the event follows, because the subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vivid inner experience and an outer one. It responds to both with equal fidelity. This is what the psalmist understood when he wrote, "Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart." That is the testimony of the 37th Psalm, the 4th verse. To delight is to feel, to dwell in the feeling of having received before the evidence arrives. This is the secret behind every account of prayer answered, every instance of so-called coincidence that stretches the imagination of the rational mind, every story of someone appearing in your life at the precise moment you had given up trying to reach them. It is not magic. It is the law of reversibility at work, the feeling producing its physical equivalent through the medium of the one subconscious mind. Now let me tell you how this applies to the subject of our teaching tonight. When you wish another person to think of you, to feel drawn to you, to reach out to you, to include you in their thoughts with warmth and frequency, you must not begin with the desire to make them think of you. You must begin with the feeling that would exist if they already were thinking of you. What would you feel if, right now, the person you have in mind were sitting beside you, speaking your name with affection, telling you that you had been on their mind all week? What would that feel like, not as an idea, but as a bodily experience? Would you feel warmth in your chest? Would you feel a softening of the muscles in your face? Would you feel the particular quality of ease that comes when someone you value makes it clear that they value you in return? That feeling, that precise, specific bodily sensation is your instrument. It is the signal that the subconscious mind transmits. And when you hold it in the drowsy state, with the naturalness and the vividness of a real experience, you are not merely imagining a pleasant scene. You are impressing upon the subconscious mind a felt belief in the reality of the connection. And the subconscious, incapable of distinguishing between the impression made by a real event and the impression made by a vividly imagined one, goes to work producing the conditions that match the feeling, including the impulse in the other person's mind to turn their thoughts toward you. I must tell you something important here, because it is the place where most people falter. The feeling must be sustained. Not with effort. Effort is the enemy of this process. Not with the straining concentration of a person trying to hold a heavy object overhead, but with the gentle, returning attention of a person who has found something pleasant and keeps coming back to it the way you might return to a favorite view from a window. Florence Scovel Shinn put it with her usual directness. She said, "Your word is your wand," but she was not speaking about spoken words or affirmations repeated by rote. She was speaking about the word that is felt, the inner declaration that carries the full weight of conviction behind it. When you declare in feeling that another person is already thinking of you with warmth, when you inhabit that declaration the way you inhabit your own body, your word becomes a wand. It shapes the invisible substance of the shared mind the way a wand shapes the air through which it moves. But the opposite is also true. When you declare in feeling that the person has forgotten you, that they do not care, that the distance between you is permanent and uncrossable, that too is a wand. That too shapes the invisible substance. And the subconscious mind, which does not evaluate the desirability of your commands but only executes them, builds exactly what you have declared. A man came to me, a schoolteacher from Detroit, quiet and earnest, a man of perhaps 45 years. I will call him Arthur. He had been married for 18 years to a woman he loved deeply, but the marriage had grown cold in the way that long marriages sometimes do, not through any single betrayal or any dramatic failure, but through the slow, almost imperceptible accumulation of routines and silences and small resentments that harden into a kind of emotional distance neither partner can name or locate, but both can feel. Arthur wanted his wife to look at him again, the way she had looked at him when they were young. Not with romance, exactly. He was too practical a man for romance. But with attention, with interest, with the warm awareness that the person sitting across from you at the breakfast table is someone you have chosen and are glad you chose. I asked Arthur to practice the law of reversibility. I asked him, "What would you feel if your wife, tomorrow morning, looked across the table and said, 'I was thinking about you last night and I remembered why I married you'?" Arthur thought about it. He said he would feel a warmth in his stomach, that was his precise word, stomach, and a loosening in his throat, as though something that had been held tight for years had suddenly let go. "Hold that feeling," I said. "Tonight, as you lie beside her, in the quiet before sleep, hold that feeling. Do not try to send it to her. Do not try to change her mind. Simply feel what you would feel if she had already changed, if the warmth had already returned to the room between you." Let it be as natural as a memory, and then let sleep take you. Arthur practiced this for 5 weeks. He told me the first week was the hardest, because every time he tried to hold the feeling, his conscious mind interrupted with evidence of its absence, her turned back, her short replies, the perfunctory kiss at the door. But he persisted, not with force, with patience. With the patient returning to the feeling the way you return to a practice that you know is right even when the results are not yet visible. In the 6th week, Arthur's wife made a remark at dinner. She said, and Arthur wrote this down and brought it to me, "I had the strangest thought yesterday. I was standing at the kitchen window, and I suddenly remembered the first time you came to pick me up for a date. You were wearing that ridiculous brown jacket, and I thought, I am glad I opened the door." Arthur did not tell his wife what he had been practicing. He did not need to. The feeling he had been holding, that warm, released, grateful feeling, had traveled the only road it could travel, through the one mind that connects a husband and a wife more intimately than any conversation ever could. And it had arrived, not as his thought transplanted into her mind, but as her own thought, arising naturally from the deep interior of her own memory, because the feeling he held had stirred the waters they both share. The law of reversibility. Feel the result before the result appears. Live in the feeling as though it were a room you have entered and need not leave. And trust that the subconscious mind, which governs the movement of every thought and every impulse in the shared interior, will arrange the outer world to match the inner one, because that is the only thing it knows how to do. I must now tell you something that will seem, at first, to contradict everything I have said, and I ask you to hear it slowly, because it is not a contradiction. It is a completion. You must let go. After you have entered the drowsy state, after you have constructed your scene, after you have felt the warmth and the naturalness of the connection as though it already existed, you must release it. You must let it fall from the hands of your conscious mind the way a farmer lets a seed fall into the earth. Not with indifference, but with trust. Not with abandonment, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knows that the soil will do what the soil was made to do. This is where the practice most often fails. Not in the doing, but in the undoing. Not in the impressing of the idea upon the subconscious mind, but in the refusal to stop impressing it, to stop checking on it, to stop digging up the seed to see whether it has sprouted. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this better than almost any teacher I have known. She put it in 4 words that I have repeated to more people than I can count. Let go and let God. And by God, she did not mean a distant deity to whom you surrender your will. She meant the infinite intelligence of the subconscious mind, the creative power that operates beneath your awareness, that knows how to bring about the fulfillment of your desire by paths you could not plan and through means you could not arrange. Your job is to plant. Its job is to grow. And if you stand over the ground with your hands clenched, asking every hour whether the seed has moved, you are not assisting the process. You are strangling it. Let me tell you about 2 men. Both came to me within the same year, both with the same desire, to restore a broken relationship. The first man, I will call him Richard, had been estranged from his adult son for 6 years. A bitter argument over the son's choice of career had opened a wound that time had not healed but had only hardened into scar tissue. Richard loved his son. That was never in question. But Richard's love had curdled into something desperate, a need so fierce and so visible that it radiated from him like heat from a stove. You could feel it the moment you entered a room with him. His letters to his son, which had gone unanswered for years, were saturated with it. His prayers were saturated with it. Every thought he had about his son was wrapped in the suffocating urgency of a man who needed something so badly that the need itself had become the dominant signal. I taught Richard the method. He practiced it faithfully. But Richard could not let go. He would lie in the drowsy state, hold the scene, feel the warmth of his son's return, and then, the moment he finished the exercise, he would open his eyes and begin the vigil. He would check his telephone. He would compose another letter in his head. He would rehearse conversations that had not yet occurred. He would carry the thought of his son through every waking hour, not as a quiet feeling of connection, but as a raw, exposed wound that he could not stop pressing. 6 months passed. Nothing changed. Richard's son did not call, did not write, did not appear, and Richard came back to me, defeated, and said, "Your method does not work." I said, "The method works. You did not complete it. You planted the seed and then stood over the ground with a lantern all night, asking it to grow. The seed needs darkness. It needs the unconscious, unobserved, unhurried work of the deep mind, and you never gave it that, because you were too afraid to look away." Richard stared at me for a long moment, and then he said something that revealed the true nature of his difficulty. He said, "But if I stop thinking about him, he will forget me entirely." Do you hear the belief buried in that sentence? Richard believed that his constant, anxious attention was the only thread holding the connection in place, that if he stopped pulling, the thread would dissolve. This is the great illusion of the anxious mind. It confuses effort with effect. It believes that the harder you grip, the more you hold. But the subconscious mind does not respond to grip. It responds to feeling. And the feeling of Richard's grip was not love. It was fear, the fear of loss, the fear of abandonment. The fear that connection, once broken, is broken beyond any hope of repair. That fear, transmitted daily through the shared interior, reached his son not as an invitation to return, but as a reminder of the very weight he had spent 6 years trying to escape. The second man, I will call him Thomas, found himself in a nearly identical situation. An estrangement from his brother, lasting 4 years, caused by a disagreement over the care of their aging mother. Thomas learned the same method, he practiced the same exercise. But Thomas had a quality that Richard lacked. He could plant and walk away. Thomas told me that when he finished his nightly practice, he would say to himself, silently, with the calm of a man who has posted a letter and trusts the postal service, "It is done." And then he would turn his attention to other things. He would read, he would tend his garden. He would go about the ordinary business of his life without checking, without monitoring, without measuring the distance between himself and the result he desired. Thomas described this to me as the hardest thing he had ever done, harder than the visualization itself, harder than the feeling, harder than anything. Because the conscious mind, with its ferocious need to manage and control and predict, kept demanding that he take action, that he do something, that he at least worry productively about the outcome. And each time the demand arose, Thomas noticed it and returned to the 2 words, "It is done." Thomas's brother called him after 4 weeks, not 6 months, 4 weeks. The call was not preceded by any visible catalyst. No mutual friend intervened, no family emergency forced the issue, no accidental encounter on a street corner broke the ice. The brother called and said, "I have been thinking about you. I think we should talk." The difference between Richard and Thomas was not effort. Both men put forth effort. It was not belief. Both men believed. It was not technique. Both men practiced the same technique. The difference was release, the willingness to let the seed lie in darkness. Thomas trusted the process enough to let it work in the dark. Richard trusted his own anxiety more than he trusted the subconscious mind, and his anxiety, broadcast continually through the shared interior, told his son the same thing it had always told him: stay away. This is the paradox, and I ask you to let it settle into you slowly. The firmest grip on your desire is an open hand. The most powerful intention is one that has been released into the care of the intelligence that knows how to fulfill it. Effort applied to the impressing of the idea is good and necessary. Effort applied to the management of the outcome is poison. Be still and know that I am God. That is the counsel of the Psalms, the 46th Psalm, the 10th verse. And stillness, in this context, is not inactivity, it is not passivity. It is the active, deliberate, courageous choice to trust the deep mind with the seed you have planted and to refuse the temptation to dig it up before it has had time to take root. When you practice the method I have taught you, when you enter the drowsy state, construct the scene, hold the feeling of the wish fulfilled, do it once each evening. Do it with sincerity and vividness and the full feeling of its reality, and then release it. Let it go, turn over, fall asleep, and let the subconscious mind, which has been building worlds in the darkness since before you were born, do what it was made to do. Your only enemy in this process is the anxiety that would have you check and recheck and check again. Let the anxiety pass through you the way weather passes through an open field. It will come, it will go. And beneath it, unaffected by its noise, the seed will be growing in the dark, silently, certainly, inevitably, because that is what seeds do when they are planted in good soil and left alone. I want to speak to you now about something that most teachers of mental influence avoid, because it is uncomfortable and because it does not sell books. But I have never been in the business of selling comfort, and I will not begin tonight. The law I have taught you is real. It works. It operates through the subconscious mind with the same impersonal reliability with which gravity operates through the mass of the earth. But a law that works is a law that can be misused, and I would be failing you, failing the teaching itself, if I did not tell you where the boundary lies between the rightful use of this law and its corruption. The boundary is here. You may call, but you may not compel. Let me say it again, because I want the words to sit in your mind with the weight they deserve. You may call, but you may never compel another human being through the power of your thought. When you enter the drowsy state and hold the feeling of connection with another person, the feeling that they are thinking of you, that they are drawn to you, that they wish to be in your presence, you are sending a signal through the one subconscious mind. That signal is real. It reaches the other person. It stirs something in the deep interior of their awareness. But, and this is the point on which the entire ethics of this practice rests, what the other person does with that stirring is their affair and not yours. You cannot override another person's free will. The subconscious mind, for all its power, does not function as a mechanism of control. It functions as a medium of communion. When you send the feeling of warmth toward another person, you are not pushing a button that makes them think of you. You are creating an atmosphere, an inner climate, in which the thought of you becomes more likely to arise, more pleasant when it arrives, more difficult to dismiss when it presents itself. But whether the other person acts on that thought, whether they pick up the telephone, write the letter, walk through the door, depends on the full complexity of their own inner life, their own beliefs, their own free will. This is not a limitation. It is a protection. And it protects you as much as it protects them. A woman came to me, I will call her Dolores, who had been using these principles not with warmth, but with something closer to obsession. She had been thinking about a man, a former lover, with a focused intensity that she believed constituted the method I had taught. But when I listened to her describe her practice, I heard something very different from what I teach. I heard possession, I heard demand. I heard the unspoken conviction that this man belonged to her and that the only acceptable outcome was his return on her terms, to her conditions, under her dominion. I said to Dolores what I will say to you. If the feeling you hold is not one you would want held about you, do not hold it about another. This is the golden rule of mental influence, and it is not a suggestion. It is a law as firm as the law of reversibility itself. If you would not want someone to sit in the darkness and project the feeling of ownership toward you, the feeling that you must think of them, must return to them, must obey the pull they are generating, then do not project that feeling toward anyone else. If you would not want to be the object of someone's anxious, grasping, demanding thought dressed up in the language of love but carrying the frequency of control, then do not be the source of such thought toward another. Therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. That is the teaching recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, the 7th chapter, the 12th verse. And it applies not only to your words and your actions, but to your thoughts and your feelings, because, as I have been teaching you all evening, your thoughts and your feelings are not private. They travel, they reach, they affect, and they carry the same moral weight as any word spoken or any deed performed. Let me tell you what I told Dolores. I said, the highest use of this law is not to make someone think about you. It is to bless them, to hold them in the feeling of their own freedom, their own happiness, their own highest good, and to include yourself in that vision as a welcome presence, not a necessary one. This is a subtle distinction, and I ask you to consider it carefully. When you sit in the drowsy state and hold the image of another person, you have a choice. You can hold them as an object, something you want to acquire, to attract, to bring within the orbit of your need. Or you can hold them as a subject, a free and sovereign being whose happiness matters to you independently of whether that happiness includes you. The first choice produces results that are brittle, anxious, and ultimately unsatisfying. Because even if the person responds, they respond to your need, and need does not sustain a relationship. The second choice produces results that are deep, genuine, and lasting, because the person responds not to your need but to your love, and love, unlike need, has no expiration date. I watched Dolores struggle with this distinction. She came back to me 3 times over the course of 2 months, each time insisting that what she felt was love, and each time revealing through the quality of her language and the particular tenor of her feeling that what she felt was possession wearing the mask of love. I could hear it in the way she spoke about him, not as a person with his own life, his own journey, his own reasons for staying away, but as an absence in her life, a missing piece that she needed returned in order to feel whole. She was not thinking of him. She was thinking of herself, of her need, her emptiness, her refusal to accept that the universe might have a design for both their lives that did not require his return on her schedule. I do not say this to judge her. I say it because the same temptation awaits every person who learns this law, and the temptation is real precisely because the law is real. It works, And the knowledge that it works can become a tool of the ego as easily as a tool of the soul. The test is always the same. Ask yourself, would I be willing for this person to be happy without me? If the answer is yes, genuinely, not performatively, then your feeling toward them is clean and true and worthy of transmission. And love transmitted through the one subconscious mind is the most powerful force in human experience. If the answer is no, if the thought of their happiness without you produces resentment or panic or the desperate impulse to tighten your grip, then what you are transmitting is not love, it is hunger. And hunger, no matter how sincerely felt, does not build what you are hoping to build. Dolores eventually came to see this. It took her 3 months, and it required her to grieve the relationship not as it was but as she had needed it to be. And when the grief had done its work, she was able to hold this man in her thought with genuine warmth and genuine freedom, to wish him well without the silent condition that his well-being include her. And it was then, and only then, that he returned to her life of his own free will, not because she had perfected a technique, but because the quality of her feeling had changed from demand to blessing, and blessing, operating through the law I have taught you, invites without condition or demand. An invitation, freely extended and freely received, is the only foundation upon which anything lasting has ever been built. Everything I have taught you so far has been a technique, a deliberate practice to be undertaken at a specific time, in a specific state of mind, for a specific purpose. But I want to leave you with something more than a technique. I want to leave you with an understanding that will outlive any single practice and outlast any single desire. The understanding is this: the deepest form of mental influence is not something you do. It is something you become. There are people in this world, and you have met them, even if you could not explain what made them different, who seem to occupy the thoughts of others without any visible effort. They do not send mental telegrams. They do not practice techniques before sleep. They do not sit in the drowsy state and construct scenes. And yet they are thought about, remembered, sought out, drawn toward. They carry a quality that I can only describe as magnetic presence, a warmth, a fullness, a quiet certainty that makes other people feel more real in their company and less real in their absence. This quality is not charisma in the popular sense. It is not charm, which is a performance. It is not attractiveness in the physical sense, which is a gift of genetics. It is something deeper and more durable than any of these, something that radiates from the inside out and that has nothing to do with how a person looks or what they say, and everything to do with what they have become in the quiet interior of their own subconscious mind. Florence Scovel Shinn called it divine magnetism. She used the phrase often, and she meant by it something very specific: the natural, effortless, attractive power that emanates from a person who is in alignment with their own highest nature. Not a person who is perfect, not a person who has achieved some exalted spiritual state beyond the reach of ordinary men and women. Simply a person who has done the inner work of clearing away the fear, the resentment, the smallness, the chronic sense of lack that clogs the channel through which the divine energy flows, and who lives, therefore, in a state of inner abundance that others can feel the way you feel the warmth of sunlight entering a room. This is what I want for you. Not merely the ability to make a specific person think of you at a specific time. That is useful, and I have taught it to you, and it will serve you well. But beyond the technique, beyond the practice, beyond the nightly exercise in the drowsy state, there is a way of being that renders the technique almost unnecessary, because when you are living from the fullness of your own inner life, you become the kind of person that other people cannot help but think about. How does one arrive at this? Not through effort, not through the straining accumulation of spiritual practices stacked one upon another like bricks in a wall, through subtraction, through the removal of the inner obstacles that stand between you and the natural radiance that is your birthright as a being made in the image of the infinite. Let me tell you what I mean. Every fear you carry is an obstruction. Every resentment you hold is a shadow cast across the light that would otherwise shine through you without interruption. Every grievance you rehearse in the privacy of your own mind, every old wound you return to, every slight you have not forgiven, every person you have judged and sentenced in the court of your interior, darkens the channel. And a darkened channel does not attract, it repels, not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, subtly, in the way that people drift away from a room that feels cold without knowing why it feels cold. The work then is not to add something to yourself. It is to remove what does not belong, to forgive what you have not forgiven, not for the sake of the person who wronged you, but for the sake of your own inner clarity, to release what you have not released, not because the grievance was unjustified, but because carrying it costs you more than the person who caused it will ever pay. To clean the interior the way you would clean a window through which light is meant to pass, knowing that every smudge and every stain diminishes what the world receives from you. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. That is the counsel of the Gospel of Matthew, the 5th chapter, the 16th verse. And your light does not need to be manufactured. It does not need to be amplified. It does not need to be projected through techniques or methods or exercises. It needs only to be unobstructed, clear the obstructions, and the light shines on its own. And people, all people, not merely the one person you have been thinking about, will feel it. They will think about you. They will be drawn to you, not because you sent them a signal, but because you became a signal, a living, breathing, walking broadcast of warmth and presence and inner abundance that the subconscious mind of every person you encounter registers the way a compass registers north. A man I knew in my early years in Los Angeles, not a student of mine, but a friend, embodied this quality so naturally that I studied him the way a scientist studies a phenomenon. His name was Edmund, and he was a carpenter by trade, a quiet man who had never read a book on the subconscious mind and would have been bemused by the idea that he possessed any unusual power. But Edmund was the kind of man that people remembered. You would meet him once, at a dinner party or in the course of a business transaction, and weeks later you would find yourself thinking about him, not because he had said anything remarkable, but because something about his presence had left an impression on the deep mind that ordinary social encounters do not leave. I asked Edmund once what he thought about when he met a new person, and he gave me an answer that I have never forgotten. He said, "I just wonder what their life is like. I try to see what it feels like to be them for a minute, and I hope it is going well." That was all. No technique, no method, no practice. Just a genuine, undefended interest in the inner life of another person and a wordless wish for their well-being. And that interest, that wish, operating through the one mind that connects all human beings, left an impression so deep that people carried Edmund with them long after the conversation ended, not because he had tried to be memorable, but because he had been present in a way that most people never are. You can become this. Not by imitating Edmund, because imitation is a surface change, and what I am describing is a change of depth, but by doing the inner work, the forgiveness, the release, the clearing of the channel that allows your natural warmth to flow outward without obstruction, by filling your own subconscious mind so thoroughly with goodwill, with gratitude, with the quiet conviction that life is generous and that you have enough and are enough, that the feeling radiates from you the way heat radiates from a stone that has been lying in the sun all afternoon. This is the final lesson, and it is the most important one. The person who is full does not need to reach. The person who is warm does not need to call. The person who lives in the feeling of abundance and connection does not need to practice techniques to be thought about, because they have become the kind of presence that the human mind returns to again and again, the way the eye returns to a light in a dark room. Fill yourself, clear the channel. Let the light through, and trust that the one mind which knows every heart and hears every silent feeling will complete the work you have begun. We have traveled a great distance together tonight, you and I. We began with a telephone ringing on a Wednesday evening, and we have arrived here, at the quiet center of a truth that has been operating in your life since before you knew it had a name. You have learned that there is one mind, not many, one vast interior in which your thought and the thought of every other living person are already touching, already connected, already in communion. You have learned that the medium of this connection is not thought but feeling. That what you feel about another person is the signal that travels, and what you think is only the container that carries it. You have learnt the method, the drowsy state, the specific scene, the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You have learnt the paradox, that the tightest grip is an open hand, in the most powerful act of influence is the willingness to release. You have learnt the boundary, that you may call but you may not compel, and that the only signal worth sending is one you would be honored to receive. And you have learnt the deepest truth of all, that the highest form of this law is not a practice but a way of being, a life lived in such inner fullness that your very presence becomes the message. Before you sleep tonight, I want you to carry 3 truths with you into the borderland between waking and sleeping. Say them slowly, feel them. Let them settle into the soil of your subconscious mind the way rain settles into the earth. I am connected to every mind through the one infinite intelligence, and my feeling of love reaches anyone I hold in thought. My inner world is the cause of my outer experience, and I now fill that inner world with warmth, with goodwill, and with the quiet certainty that every right connection is already established. I release every person I love into the care of the infinite, knowing that what belongs to me by divine right cannot be lost, cannot be withheld, and cannot be kept from me by any power in heaven or on earth. These are not wishes, they are recognitions. They describe what is already true in the one mind, waiting only for your feeling to bring it into visible expression in your life. Sleep in that feeling tonight. Let it be the last impression your conscious mind delivers to the deep interior before the gatekeeper steps aside and the subconscious mind takes up its nightly work. Plant your seed in good soil, and then let the darkness do what it was made to do. Whatever you have been reaching for, whoever you have been longing to reach, is already closer than you think. Not closer in miles, not closer in time, closer in mind. Because in the one mind there is no distance, there is only feeling, and feeling held with love and released with trust has never once failed to find its way home. Go in peace. The connection is already made.